allow me to start with an introduction. My name is Israel Puglisi. My NTID is IPUGL, and of course my email is israel.puglisi@allstate.com. I'm currently a member of the network fulfillment team. Well, actually, more specifically, I'll say the network services fulfillment team. And as a member of this team, I tell you, I've had an opportunity to get my hands on some cool stuff. Some of that stuff we're going to be going over here today, but everything from F5 VIPs and wide IPs and load balancing and disaster recovery exercises and security certificates over to info blocks for IPAM, IP address management, and DNS, internal and external. Now, my time here has also taught me that, well, one, some of the things that I find cool and interesting, well, they're really not, and two, that they can be a little bit confusing to some people. And as a matter of fact, that's why I wanted to make this video, was to hopefully shed a little bit of light on some of that confusion. Or, at the very least, to make sure that we are speaking the same language when you and your team find yourselves in need of the fulfillment services. I'm going to tell you a little about myself. This is a first time for me, meaning the audio and video recording. Because it's a Skype meeting, it actually has to happen all in one take. So on top of fighting being nervous, I'm going to really struggle with making sure that I don't forget anything. And I tell you that because I may have to back up a couple of times in order to bring in something that I forgot or just failed to mention. Something else about myself is whiteboards. I use them all the time. I have one right over there that I commandeer, and I use this one here behind me daily. So, I tell you this because you may see this image pop in onto the screen from time to time. This is, it's an image of my notes. It's here for me to try and, I guess, as an outline for what I want to put across to you, not necessarily for you to kind of be able to read and understand. I'll try and keep it off the screen, but I may refer to it, and I didn't want it to catch you off guard. So, enough about me. Let's talk about change and request. Everything that we're going to be talking about today or going over in this video can be done via a standard request. Now, operating under the default that no modification can happen inside of Allstate's infrastructure without an approved change order, our standard request means that you and your team don't have to create that change order and bring it to us. We have our own change order that we create, and then we'll log your standard request as work under our standard or under our change order. And as a matter of fact, that's one of the few times in which maybe our team might give you some pushback as far as what we're willing to do under our own internal change order. And as opposed to you creating a scheduled request and then using your own change order and then kind of utilizing our team as a resource on one of those C tasks inside of your change order. So again, everything we're going to talk about is going to be just a standard request via ServiceNow. Lastly and quickly, you may be asking yourself, do I really need to know all of this? Video seems kind of long, and the answer is yes, and here is why. The fulfillment team, well, what we're going to do is create this environment for you. We're going to create these objects, and then through some confirmation emails, turn it over to you and your team. The management, the maintenance, and the failover of your environment will be up to you and your team. Now, there's a few things that you'll have to come back to the fulfillment team to kind of tweak in your environment. But for those reasons, your ability to effectively communicate exactly what it is that you're trying to work on becomes paramount to your success, our success in getting these requests done for you. So with all of that said, we're going to get started. We're going to start, because I can't assume any knowledge level of my audience. We're going to start with a very basic infrastructure, one web application. We're going to call this web application Israel. Because of me. We're going to have one data center and one server. And what we're going to do is grow this environment all the way out to an externally facing wide IP, 2 data centers, just a very complex environment. And I'm assuming that you as a web or app or dev team, or you'll fall somewhere in the middle there. But I'm going to throw a lot of information at you, so well, you get to rewind, but we'll go on and get started now. As I said, we have our one server and our one data center. So what do you need in order to get this this server communicating on the network? You need an IP address, and well, for our web app, we're going to need a DNS name. So IP address, that's simple enough, 4 octets. We'll assign that IP address for you. Yeah. The DNS, what is DNS? DNS is, well, it's a protocol that allows you to associate a friendly name with an IP address or a fully qualified domain name. So it's just a way to use a friendly name. Now, throughout this discussion, we're going to be talking about some shortcomings of DNS and how the F5 and wide IPs and VIPs solve those shortcomings. But for now, it's just that friendly name that has a few shortcomings. The first shortcoming is that DNS as a protocol cannot resolve past the 4 octets of an IP address. In other words, you can't go into a socket. You can't :80 on the end of the IP address and then use that as a destination or a target for a DNS record. It's a shortcoming of the DNS protocol, and there is a way to get around that, and we're going to touch on that. So we know we need an IP address and a DNS name. Now, how do we get those? Each of those are handled inside of ServiceNow by simply typing DNS. And you'll see that the first 4 offerings here, well, there's those scheduled ones that I had referred to. And again, that's if you're using your change order and bringing it to us, you'll associate your change order with this scheduled request. And that's how you can get a hold of your resource that'll be working for you. But again, everything we're doing is standard. Now, we already discussed that we need an IP address and a DNS record. In that case, we select the standard IP and DNS offering. Now, you saw the other one there, the DNS standard offering. We're going to come back to that because that record will allow you to not only create, in other words, if we didn't need an IP address here, we could have selected the other one, just DNS standard request. To just get the DNS name created, but you can also modify, edit, and delete. Create, modify, and delete. I always throw edit in there, but create, modify, and delete using that other DNS standard request. The request is pretty simple. The issue comes in that every request that you work with the fulfillment team on, you're going to attach an associated spreadsheet, whether it's a DNS spreadsheet or an F5 spreadsheet. And we're going to go over both of them, starting here with the DNS spreadsheet. This spreadsheet requires that you begin to expand your knowledge of certain DNS protocols, one of them being the types of records that are available. The 3 most common that I've kind of come to see is that that you'll most likely deal with are your A records, and the targets on an A record is an IP address. We kind of already talked about that, just 4 octets and 4 octets only. The second is a CNAME, or a fully qualified domain name, as a target. This is probably it's probably the second most common request that we'll get that we're just not able to fulfill. The DNS protocol can't resolve further beyond the .com. We can't go deep into your URL and use that as a target. It's going to stop at the .com or a fully qualified domain name only. NS records, less common. This deals with our external wide IPs, but we'll get to there in the end. But just know for now that actually has a name server as a target. So A record, IP address, CNAME record has a fully qualified domain name, and then an NS record has the name servers. So here's back to our spreadsheet. And as I said, that DNS request and this spreadsheet, you're able to add, change, and remove, or work with your TTLs or your time to lives. You're able to actually do both internal, external, through this same request. And here again, as I said, this is where you kind of need to know what type of record that you're working with, and in knowing the type of record, you would have to know that an A record has a target of an IP address. Now, I say this because sometimes we will get quite a bit, actually. We'll get someone who wants an A record, but they'll give us a fully qualified domain name as a target. And it creates a dilemma because I can look up the fully qualified domain name and get an IP address. I'm sorry, I got that. So I can look up the fully qualified domain name and get the IP address and then give you an A record. I have come to see that occasionally there are some targets, or I'm sorry, some web applications that are finicky about whether it's a C name or an A record. So when we are kind of guessing what you want, it's just better if you tell us exactly what it is that you want. So you see here, we're going to select what type of record. The DNS name is going to be real simple for us, and the domain that it exists. Think of the domain as a bucket. It's kind of where we create the records. So in this case, it would be israel.allstate.com. You could create this in ad.allstate.com or say test.allstate.com. Each of those would be a different bucket that would change the ending of your DNS name, israel.test.allstate.com, for example. Now, we don't have an existing target. If we were doing a modify here or even a remove record, then we would have an existing target that's in place for that record. We're going to have our IP address, and let's make the assumption here that we gave you a 10 dot for hudsonside.x.2. That's going to be our IP address. Of course, X isn't an option, but we'll go with .2. So now we're going to, well, let's make the assumption that you've submitted the requests correctly and it hits our queue, and we work based on an SLA, and we all just kind of pull out of the queue and work these. How do you check it? It's probably the third most common email that I get. Did you create my DNS? I'm going to show you here how you have access to the same tools that I do to check. So when someone asks me, hey, did you create my DNS? You click start and you type CMD and you hit enter. That's going to open a command prompt for you. The command that you're going to use is NS lookup. This is a DNS query, so you can NS lookup anything. In this case, we're going to NS lookup israel.allstate.com. Now, I didn't take this and create. I guess I could have. No, I wouldn't have. Anyways, so of course, no record is returned here, and that's expected. Let's look up, say, NS lookup allstate.com. And as I said, this is just a query, so you can look up anything and you're not going to harm anything. And as you see here, that the fact that something came back tells me that yes, that there's a record there. I don't know what's going on or what the specifics are about it, but I can definitely tell that there is a record there. So if you do an NS lookup on our israel.allstate.com at this point in our scenario, then you would expect to see an IP address that returns of 10.64.x.2, and that would be an A record that we would create based on your service catalog request. So we got our A record in place, we have our IP address, and we've validated with the NS lookup tool. Now what we're going to do is operate under the principle for this scenario that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So continually we're going to add to our infrastructure, and this is the first one. We want to add an entire second server to still one data set in the Hudson data center, but we're going to add a second server to it. So just like the first, what is it that you'll need? You'll need an IP address and a DNS. The IP address, we already know how what request you can submit to get that. In this case, for the DNS, or for the DNS, there's no need to put in for the IP DNS standard offering because our DNS is already in place. We have an A record that's for israel.allstate.com. So in this case, we would just put in a DNS standard offering in order to modify based on the spreadsheet here. Wouldn't be modify. We're going to change the target. I'm sorry, I'm glad I came in here. It's not modify, we're going to change the target, which essentially is a modify. And what we're going to do is add our next IP. Now let's assume that you got those submitted correctly again, and we returned you with 10.64.x.3. So now we have our A server as .2 and our B server as .3. We add that IP address to the DNS name Israel. The DNS protocol itself will then start to round robin those two IP addresses. So when you do an NS lookup, which you will do to validate that we gave you the IP address and modified your DNS, when you do the NS lookup the first time, it'll come back as the .2. You do it from a different machine or maybe your own, and it'll come back as the .3. The DNS protocol will round robin those itself. The shortcoming, as I said on DNS, is that DNS doesn't care about the status of the target. It's just going to direct the traffic there and send it. It doesn't care whether that server on the end is on or even ready to accept or receive traffic. So you get around that by, well, invoking the F5, which is going to be a better option for you than round robin DNS. Like I said, with it not caring what that target is or what the status of that target is, that's not a good way to round robin there. So what are we going to do with the F5? On the F5, and this is the configuration we're going to put together for you, what we're going to do is we're going to take your server A, which is no problem, our .2 address. Then we're going to take your server B, which is no problem again, our .3 address. And we're going to put both of those into a pool. And at that point, they become pool members. So we'll refer to them as pool members. So these pool members would then be inside of a pool. We're then going to take your pool and put it inside of what's called a VIP, now a virtual IP. Now this picture is a little misleading in that, because you may ask here, why take this extra step of putting it in this pool box? Why not just throw it into a VIP and call it a day? And the reason is that a VIP has the ability to be associated with multiple pools. What we're going to do is assign it its default load balancing pool, but it has that ability to be associated with additional pools. So that's the reason of why. And then you can manage the pool members within those. But for this scenario, we're going to go with our default load balancing pool that contains your A and B server pool members. So what do you need in order to get this going? Again, we kind of already talked about it. It's pretty simple. You're going to need a pool. The naming convention, that's why I kind of stumbled here. The naming convention is, well, it's kind of a standard, but it's kind of not a standard. Most VIPs that I work with go with a kind of a common sense naming convention, we'll call it. So what we're going with is, say, Israel as our DNS, our app name. We're going to include that it's in the GL data center, and maybe we're including that it's on the 80 port. Now, I've seen people include prod or whatever environment that it's in, anything that's going to really identify what VIP you're talking about. For the fulfillment team, we're simply going to add a -pool on the end. And that's going to identify your pool. You're going to let us know what the pool members are going to be inside of the pool. Now, this is where I said one of the shortcomings of DNS was that it won't resolve past those 4 octets of the IP address. Well, this is how you get around it, because what a pool member is really only a socket that exists inside of the pool. It's an IP port combination. So that's how you'll resolve to a port using an IP address. So we'll come back to that when we're creating or modifying our DNS. So as I said, we're going to add our pool members into the pool. The second, that other shortcoming of DNS was that it just passes that traffic to .2 or .3, not really caring, or the member server, not really caring what the status of that server is. F5 solves that shortcoming because of a thing called a health monitor, and you're going to let us know, you're going to let the fulfillment team know what that health monitor is going to be. So what is a health monitor? It's as I say here, it's a ping. It's a way for the F5 to kind of keep alive. It's not a keep alive. So it's going to ping every 5 seconds, say, and it isn't ping. You let us know. It could be a TCP health monitor. There's all kinds of health monitors, but every 5 seconds, it's going to kind of tap on the shoulder of one of the servers or all of the servers in your pool and say, hey, are you there? Are you ready to receive traffic? And if that server replies with an expected response, then the F5 will mark that server as in the green, and that he or she is ready to receive traffic. Now, if the server fails to respond to the F5 when it goes and taps on the shoulder, then the F5 is going to say that that server is not ready. It doesn't know if it's turned off. It doesn't know if just it's having failure. It doesn't know. All it knows is that it's failing the health monitor. So in that case, it's going to mark that server as down, and it's going to say, I'm not going to send traffic there. Now, I really explain that because, and we're going to discuss later a tool in which you'll see a red and green status. And a lot of times people will say, well, why is my server down, on the F5? Your server, I don't know if your server is down. The only thing that the red-green status is indicating is the current status of the health monitor, only the health monitor. It's not a status of the server. For whatever reason, your server is not replying with the expected response, and it's marking it down because it's failing the health monitor. So it's a common question that we get, and really we as a fulfillment team don't know, or it's just failing. That's all we can really, the information that we can provide, other than checking your VIP configuration. Speaking of VIP, that's the second thing that we need here. The VIP naming convention is going to be identical to your pool. So your pool and your VIP will be named the same, except your VIP will end in -VIP. That's the only difference between the two. And then your VIP is associated with the default pool. And in this case, we said our default pool is going to be, well, our A and B server, member server pool there. Now, in addition to providing us the health monitor for the member servers, you're also going to let us know other things like persistence. I have here cookie persistence. It could be source address affinity. This is all based on the requirements of your application and what you need. So some people will come to us and say, well, what do I need? I don't know. We don't know. Just based on your application. You let us know via the spreadsheet, and we can put it on for you. iRules is another thing that's pretty common in HTTP or HTTPS redirect. That would be an iRule that we could put into place. All of that information is provided to us, and we start our configuration. Something else that you're going to need is a new IP address. You may ask, why do I need a new IP address? You already have your .2 and your .3. Well, let's just sum it up right now and say that we're going to assign your VIP an IP address and then use that as kind of the target. So we'll come back to that when we look at the flow of traffic, but you are going to need a new IP address. You're also going to have to modify your current DNS, because our NS lookup is going to .2 and .3, and it's round robining. So we got to submit that request and have that change done. And lastly, it's a side note here that Flipper, that's that tool I kind of mentioned. We're going to come back to that once I make. I want to make sure that you can understand the terminology and how everything's fitting together. Flipper is kind of it changes how the view is for you, and if you understand the structure of what you're looking at, then the view will be easy to understand. So we'll come back to Flipper. So once again, how do we get all of this stuff done? If we go back over to ServiceNow, and instead of typing DNS, we're going to type F5. Now F5 isn't going to have your scheduled and standard options the way that DNS did. Instead, Inside of this request, you have the ability to select whether it is a standard request or whether it is a scheduled request. And again, scheduled is where you're bringing your change order. You're engaging us as a resource. So, but all of this so far, again, is for standard work. So you're going to select standard here, and it'll hit our queue, and we'll work. Right now, it's 10-day SLA, and get it for you based on your configuration. And you're going to put that configuration across in another spreadsheet, our F5 spreadsheet, and it's only two. There's no, I tend to say, oh, another spreadsheet. It's really only two. If you're dealing with DNS, then it's a DNS spreadsheet, and if it's F5, then you're dealing with an F5 spreadsheet. So really simple. Here, you're able to create, edit, and modify, or did it again. You're able to create, modify, and delete your VIPs, or edit, add, and edit, delete your pool members. So anyways, DNS, that's simple. We already know that. It's Israel. Now, this is where it gets confusing to some, because this is not a DNS request. This is an F5. We're going to configure a VIP. We're not going to make assumptions that you even want a DNS name at this point. This is just for the creation of the VIP. And I say that because I said one of the steps, we're going to get you an IP address. You then have to modify your DNS, but you can't modify that DNS until you know the IP address. So when we finish this configuration, we're going to send you a confirmation email that's going to have your VIP IP address. You then open another DNS request, a standard DNS request, in order to modify your current DNS. If that I hope I didn't confuse that, but it's a two-step process that you have to follow, because you can't put in that DNS, that modified DNS request, until you know what IP address we're giving you. And if you don't, then you're not going to have the correct resolution if you don't follow up with the second one, because of course Israel will continue to point to the wrong IP addresses. So here, the VIP name, again, you're providing us this information. This case, it's going to be an HTTPS VIP, but yours was an 80. Here's an example of someone including prod in there. Good idea. Separate your environment. The pool, same thing. It's the exact same name as the VIP, except we're going to add -pool on the end. The virtual server IP, or the VIP IP, you don't know yet. That's what we're going to provide you. You're going to let us know what port, 80 in our case. Features, these are what I had talked about when I said persistence, or any I rules that you're going to have in place. That's where you're going to apply certain features to your VIP. We're not talking about those in this video. That's a whole nother video. But this is where you would stipulate whether you're just using the standard internal wildcard. Yeah, a whole nother video. This is that health monitor that I had referred to, that you're going to let us know which one you're using, or what health monitor you're going to use on your pool to kind of tap on the shoulder of those pool members. Pool members, that's the next one. Again, just a server, I'm sorry, an IP port combination, and it's literally here a list that you provide us of these are the member servers that you're adding. And then lastly, comments. So pretty self-explanatory. That'll get your VIP created. That'll get your IP address assigned. You're then able to put in that DNS request. What'll happen is, after we create your VIP, we'll send you a confirmation email. And inside of that email, we're going to let you know your IP address and the subnet and the default gateway that you're on. And yeah, subnet mask. I think I said IP, default gateway, subnet mask, your VIP name, the pool member. So basically, it's a confirmation letting you know this is the configuration that we've created. You can then turn around and again put in that DNS standard request. Once you put in that DNS standard request, we're going to, so we had .2 and .3, our A and B server. We're going to, let's assume that we got .9 this time. When we do our NS lookup on Israel, that's the record that's the IP address that should return, is our .9. That's what we assign to the VIP. So if you're thinking about the flow of traffic here, any user that uses the .9 address now, or the Israel DNS name, they're pointed to this .9 address, which is your VIP. Your VIP has a default load balancing pool associated with it that it then passes the traffic to. So the pool now owns the traffic. And based on your load balancing method, there's another one that you're going to let us know. It's typically round robin, but based on that load balancing pool, the pool is going to pass traffic down to those member servers. And again, those member servers are your sockets. It has that port down there. Now, if at any time a particular member server is not replying to that health request or that health monitor, that tap on the shoulder, then the pool is going to mark that member down, and in that case, all traffic would specifically go to the other servers in the pool. And if all member servers are down and the VIP has nowhere to pass traffic, then the VIP itself would be marked down. This is a trickle-up effect that happens. So I'll have a common question email is, hey, why is my VIP down? You've got to drill way down to kind of, it's down because your servers are failing to reply to the tap on the shoulder. And that's kind of hard sometimes for the server teams or the app teams to accept. But in the end, that's usually the reason why. So we've got our entire environment set up here. We are now load balancing. Our DNS name is coming back to .9. Everything's good. So we're going to operate again under the 2 is 1 and 1 is none thinking, and we're going to explode your environment here. Seems confusing, but it's really not. I'm going to zoom in here a bit. What are we looking at? It's really not as complicated as it looks. Now that you understand the VIP side of it, we know Hudson has this entire VIP infrastructure that has, both A and B servers that are inside of a pool, and that pool is a default load balancing pool for this VIP, and that's what we are calling our Hudson side. We're going to duplicate that entire data center infrastructure with a second server, or actually a third and a fourth server over in Rochelle data center. So those 2 servers are then added to a pool, a totally separate pool, and another VIP comes into play. So then you have your Rochelle VIP, and your Rochelle VIP would have its own .9, in our case, address. And what we're going to do is take each of these data centers here and here, don't mind my circles, and we're going to throw them inside of, guess what? Another pool, a wide IP pool. So now we have our data centers as pool members inside of another pool. And then we're going to, we're going to associate that pool the same way we did with our VIP with your wide IP. The difference here is that your wide IP is not going to get an IP address. Instead, what we're going to provide back to you is a fully qualified domain name. Now that should ring a bell because your CNAME records deal with targets of fully qualified domain names. So you're able to now direct traffic out here to your wide IP using DNS. So if we submit our DNS standard request to modify our DNS, our current Israel record, and we're actually going to delete our A record, and we're going to replace it with our CNAME record using Israel.igslb. And you ask why .igslb? This is a naming convention that we use, and what it identifies this as is an internal VIP. We'll get there, but this it's internal, so it gets as a standard naming convention, IGSLB. Now that doesn't mean that people are using that when they're trying to resolve to it, because again, our DNS name is Israel.allstate.com. So anytime anyone uses the Israel, they come out here to your wide IP. Your wide IP passes traffic onto its pool, and its pool passes traffic onto its members based on your load balancing, based on where you're failing over to at that moment. And again, as I said before, these are all configurations that you change, you and your team, as part of that maintenance management deal that we have going. So anyways, the wide IP receives the traffic, it passes it to its pool. Its pool load balances across whatever data center that you're going to. And let's say that we're sticking with Hudson. In that case, all the traffic would pass over here to your Hudson VIP. That VIP would pass the traffic onto your Hudson pool, and your pool, based on, again, that health monitor, will pass traffic on to, in this case, server A, because server B is just not paying attention today. So what do we need in order for this to happen? Well, we're going to need our new configuration. That's the first thing. Over in the Rochelle side, we have to duplicate our Hudson environment. Except in this case, it's going to go with a different naming. Maybe we're including RO here to identify it as the Rochelle side. You're going to identify, again, the same way you did on the Hudson side, what pool members are in your VIP. And we're going to create you that VIP and assign that new .9 address. So you now have the two addresses. This is all done on what we call the LTM, or Local Traffic Manager. Just a little bit of information there. So we get our configuration done for the Rochelle side. Second, we're going to need a new IP address for our .9. We're going to have to modify and change to a CNAME. Now, before we do that, let's go way back to when we first started talking about DNS, and we added our second server. Remember, we added that IP address and then round robin between .2 and .3. We could do the same thing here. We could add to our DNS, which now is currently .2. I'm sorry, it's currently .9. It's pointing to our Hudson VIP. We could add in our Rochelle VIP IP address, the .9, and then use DNS to round robin. Now, again, that's not the best way. The better way would be, using the load balancer. But it could be done. But in our case, we're going to modify our DNS, change it over to a CNAME record, which means first you'll have to specifically tell us to delete the A record. And replace it with a CNAME record that points to your new fully qualified domain name that we provided you with. And again, this is where that limitation of DNS, we can't go further past your fully qualified domain name into your URL and start resolving there. Another reason that I had placed a little emphasis on the .9 and being able to modify that DNS is because when we change this to a CNAME record, your two .9 addresses for your VIPs are still available. They're out there and able to be used. So what you could do is create a DNS record that points specifically to those. Maybe identify them as Israel -GL and point that one to your GL VIP, and then Israel-RO and point that one to your Rochelle, or if I got that right. What that's enabling you to do, because when you change your Israel main DNS name over to your CNAME, and that is pointing out to your wide IP, the traffic is going to go to wherever you're failing over to at that time. So maybe it's all going to Hudson. If you wanted to test your Rochelle side, then what you could do, or your Rochelle VIP, what you could do is set up that Israel-RO, point it to .9, and then regardless of the current resolution or where you're failing over to, regardless, of where all the traffic's going, you're kind of able to have this back door that kind of reaches into your Rochelle VIP and for testing purposes and stuff like that. And again, that would simply take a standard DNS request, just asking to create those records. So that's just a little bit of extra tidbit. You're going to need a new wide IP. We're going to create that. Part of creating this wide IP, you have to basically let us know which data center is your primary, which one are you resolving to, and then which one is your secondary, and what your failover method is going to be, whether it's automatic or manual. Flipper tool configuration. We are almost there, in which we're going to talk about the flipper configuration. You're also going to need an additional A record on the GTM. Now, and this is where the wide IP is on the GTM. So you may hear us refer to it as a GTM and LTM. What we're talking about are VIPs and wide IPs. You may also hear them called SLBs or GSLBs. Yeah, computing, it has lots of names. So once again, we're going to go back to our F5 standard request, in which for F5 there's only one, and you select standard inside of the request. We're going to create our entire Rochelle side the same way we did our Hudson side. You won't know the virtual server IP yet. You're going to then be ready for your wide IP. So if you look down here at the bottom of the spreadsheet, we're on VIP or SLB, and I just mentioned it's sometimes called a GSLB, and this is one of those places. It is the wide IP. It's going to be the same where you can create, modify, and delete your and there isn't much that we're doing here in regards to modification because Flipper's allowing you to do most of that yourself. But this is mainly for this is how you would get it created. Our DNS name, it's the same. We're not creating the DNS here. We're simply creating the wide IP. Your domain, as I said before, remember IGSLB? Well, yeah, that's where you're going to be because it's internal. That's why. Your primary and secondary VIPs, you're letting us know which one. This could be as simply as the GL side is primary, or the specific VIP that's going to be your primary and secondary. Simple, your failback is always it'll be your primary, your failover type. So most of this stuff is very self-explanatory. So SLB and your wide IP all done inside of the same request, which is simply typing F5 from service catalog. So what you're going to get back in that confirmation email is the name. Let me zoom in here. So what you get back in that confirmation email is, again, you're going to get your IP addresses, your default gateways, your subnets, and all of that. Then you're going to submit that modified DNS, and you're going to change your DNS. But as I said before, you have to specifically tell us. So if what you did is came in and said, hey, I want to add a record, and I want a CNAME record, and I want the new target to be Israel.allstate.com. Well, when we go in to create the CNAME, you can't have dual CNAME, or you can't have dual records for the same name. So we're going to get an error that says, hey, we're going to do a test first, an NS lookup, which you should do yourself before this, and see that there's a record that exists already. So before we can create your CNAME, we actually have to delete the A record. So, and we need permission to do that. These aren't ours. Again, we turn this environment over to you, and we would never go in and just arbitrarily assume anything about anyone's environment. So before you could proceed with your add record, you would also have to select what A record that we are deleting, and then provide the very specific IP address that was there. Kind of something like that. Or was it? Yeah, it had multiple at this point. So anyways, that gets us our NS lookup so that you can test once it's done, if everything's good. What happens now when you do that NS lookup, it changes dynamically because the resolution depends on wherever you're failing your traffic over to. So if at any given time, we said earlier that we were failing over to our Hudson data center. So if I do an NS lookup, then what I'll get back is my Hudson.9 VIP. However, if I go into Flipper and I fail everything over to my Rochelle data center and I do the same NS lookup, then I'll actually get the 10.195.x.9 instead of the Hudson side. That's going to change dynamically based on where you're resolving the traffic. And again, that's where that little note of being able to create your little testing backdoors and hitting the VIPs directly comes in kind of handy. So again, that's going to happen based on who is your primary and who is your secondary, which you let us know in the request. So everything's good. We now have, take this over here, our fully redundant, our wide IP set up. We're failing over. What is the best way to kind of look at that environment? Now, I've said it quite a few times. It's Flipper. And this is Flipper. Looks pretty plain, but it's an excellent, excellent tool to use. I can't say it enough. So Flipper, let's start here. As I said, when you had your VIP created and your wide IP, part of the steps that you have to take there is your Flipper configuration. If you go to Flipper, which is just the Flipper, actually, let's go to Flipper. Flipper MGT or mgmt.allstate.com. If you go here to that site, over here there's a help section. If you click on the help, this will give you the steps that you can take to see if in the creation of this VIP have you been onboarded, or to see if you are onboarded, and then being able to follow the steps that are there. Well, but that's for checking. If you aren't, then there's an entire link here on how to get onboarded with your VIP and wide IP. And you may ask, well, why, right? Well, I would, and here's why. Let's take a look at. Let's look at. I just worked on them a little bit. Let's look at Purple Purse. So, well, not really, but this one will work. This is a wide IP, and you see now how it's kind of structured here. So we have our wide IP, and that makes sense. And inside of our wide IP, we have two VIPs that exist. These happen to be, well, 80 VIPs, the same way that we created ours. So we would see our Hudson side VIP over here with our 10.64.x.9 address, and then we would see our Rochelle side over here with our 10.195.x.9, and this that port is how this is. So yeah, it's an 80. Inside of each of these have, well, your member servers. So these, and here's their load balancing method. I said that was a pretty common one for the F5 round robin. It's load balancing across these two sockets, which are essentially sockets. Now it equates to a server, but again, we are just interested in that IP port combination. So sockets are a member of your VIPs. They're pool members of the VIP, and then the VIPs are pool members of the wide IP. So the wide IP, your VIPs, inside of your VIPs, you have your member servers. So that's how, and essentially the Flipper tool is, all it is kind of an overlay of the F5 platform. And what it's doing is every morning, and I think at around 6 or 7, I'm not sure, it kind of updates and queries the F5 for all of this information and then presents it to you. And I say that because part of that confirmation email will be us letting you know that it'll take up to 24 hours for this VIP to show up. So if we create a VIP, it's not an instant that you can find it over here in Flipper. It'll take about 24 hours to show up. So that's Flipper. This is kind of the first reason as to why you would want to use this tool, because it's an excellent way to go in and see what is the current status of my my environment. What I would like to do is see if I can find. Well, yeah, here's a good one. So here's a wide IP. And Flipper in this mode is purely query, so there's nothing I can click here that's going to hurt anything. I'm just getting visuals at this point. their information. So here's our wide IP. Inside of our wide IP, we have our two data centers, which are our two VIPs. In this case, remember I said you're going to let us know which one is primary, which one is secondary. What you're letting us know is where you're resolving. So at this point, if I do an NS lookup on this address, I would guess that between these two, Rochelle and Hudson, that it's probably going to come back with the .88 address. Now, if they fail over to resolving 100% over here to Rochelle, and I did the same NS lookup, then it would come back with the .56, and that result would change dynamically. Now we came over here because I wanted to show you, this isn't a good example because these are actually disabled or marked down on purpose, but this would be a red triangle if these were failing the health monitor. And again, this is where some people will come in and they'll see red and they'll say, well, my server's down. Well, no, your server's not down. It's just failing that health check. And that's, again, all we can really say about it. It's failing the health check. If all of these servers were down, then your VIP would go down, and probably, and not probably, based on your failover method, may initiate a failover into your other center. Now, if both data centers are down, then of course your wide IP is down. I tell you that because, again, it's that trickle up effect that kind of happens. And even in troubleshooting, we always start. Let's take a look at your server because we're getting a lot based on how it's reacting to that health monitor. Now, onboarding. So you have access to this regardless. Once you onboard to your VIP, you see that I clicked login up there in the upper right of the screen here. So if you click login, and actually, you have to bear with me. I'm going to go get and borrow a password. Messed up. Sorry, bear with me. Once I get this borrowed, we're going to log into Flipper, and what I'm going to show you is the options that will become available to you and your team once you have someone onboarded to it. And I believe you'll log in with your -A. I do. Now, once I log in, first thing you notice right off, there's these radio buttons that become available. What these buttons allow you to do is to fail over from one data center to the other, and based on your failover type, how that happens. So again, this is functionality that's provided through the Flipper tool for you and your team. Something else that becomes available is the ability to add a member. This wasn't here before, so you're able to actually add a member, and all you're adding is a little window pops open that says IP and port, and it'll add that particular IP and port to your member or to your pool. Something else is that you're actually able to disable by clicking the little extra option here. You're able to disable or delete your members. Remember the other one we looked at, it had a member that was marked disabled on purpose. So you're able to take something offline and put it online, or completely remove it from the pool should you need. It keeps track of the activity based on name, change order if needed. It'll prompt you to put in your change order if you have one. What else? Let's look at these. So I had mentioned your health monitor. Here's where you're able to actually view, and you don't have to be logged in for this. As a matter of fact, just so we're not in here logged in, I'm going to go on and log out. And you see I've lost the ability now to enable, disable my extra menus. Buttons are gone. So I'm still able to view what the health monitor is. This is a pretty basic one, TCP. There's all kinds of them, but it tells me that it's trying to do a handshake, a TCP handshake every 5 seconds. And that lets it know that server is up and available. You can look at if you have any certs applied to it. We didn't discuss certs, but if you have any applied there, you can check them out. Here's your pool information and some traffic. Again, the pool is listed here, followed by a hyphen pool. Now your VIP, I had mentioned earlier that there were some times in which you would have to come back and interact with the fulfillment team. This would be some of those times. For example, if you wanted to either add or take away this cookie persistence that's in place here, then you would come to our team and submit a standard request to have that removed. Same way as some of these other features that are available, like SSL offload. That's a pretty common one that allows the F5 to kind of handle the SSL transactions, take some load off of your servers. So a lot of good features here that you can take advantage of if you kind of know that they're there, or do a little research on figuring out what's best for your environment. So again, some of these features, all of these features, you would have to reach out to our team. So we're getting ready to wrap this up. When you, as I said, all of these are done via standard request. That means whether it's production environment or TPT environment, we're able to do these under our internal change order, no problem. Here's another reason as to why you really want to understand the information in this video, is because if you have us create a production VIP, we're going to do that. We're going to do it inside of our rules as far as doing it in the change window and when we're allowed to do it. But we're still going to do it under our internal change order. If you then realize that, oh my goodness, when I was filling out the spreadsheet, I should have, put this down. Well, we are only allowed under our standard request and internal change order to do work on, to create. The modify creates a problem for us. That's where we say you create your change order to modify your VIP just like you would in the future, regardless if it's new or not. We're not going to, because our scripts change from a create, which is one thing under a standard request, to a modify, which is a totally another thing. So, and as I said, that's where some of those times will give you a little bit of pushback. So make sure that you submit correctly, and that way it'll save the process of you having to create a change order. All right, now we're almost done. That's all internal, and that's Flipper. What we want to look at now is our external. And luckily, there isn't, there's not a big difference. Not much difference between an external wide IP and an internal. First, it's going to be a different naming convention. I said you're going to have the IGSLB included on your internal app. Well, now this is an external and there is no IGSLB, so it'll just default, or it'll be allstate.com, so no IGSLB. We can't create a record internally that points to an external address. Security just won't allow it. So, and we mentioned way in the beginning about the DNS records and the name server as a target. That's where these come into play. It's a way to create an internal target that gets to external resolution, and that's the way we would go about it. So what are you going to need? Well, it's exactly the same. Your wide IP has your two data centers. A difference will be your IP address will be a 167 as opposed to, say, your 10 dots or your 172s could be your internal. So for our resolution, you're going to now submit that standard DNS request, because we have to get rid of the CNAME. We're not pointing out to that wide IP. This is external. So I said, as a part of creating that any wide IP, you're going to get an A record out there. And an A record is, well, that's what we're trying to get to. But the way you get to it is that name server. So if anyone uses the DNS name Israel with a name server record, what it sees as a target is your name server. And it says, hey, I don't know what this is. I'm going to send you out here to find out who this is. And that's where it's sent out to the name server, or we'll say the GTM. And that's where it gets resolution. So that's kind of a long way of saying that, that's an NS record. The name servers, we know those. So really in the request, there's no need to include, so here would be an S record. The target, you could say name servers. We like I said, we have those. We keep those handy here, as you can see. would be the NS records that we would use. And these would be the actual targets that it would hit. And as you can see, those targets are external. So it's a way to get that internal resolution out to an external environment and get resolution that way. So I think that I have covered everything. At least I hope that I have covered everything. Give me 1 second. Yes, I believe I have. So with that, I'm going to end. Again, if you have any questions, feel free. Just reach out. And if you need, we can set up a meeting with your team. There's a lot more there with our actual scheduled requests and some of the some of the finer points about your VIP configuration that you may need assistance with. But again, feel free to reach out, Israel.puglisi@allstate.com. Whew. Thanks.